In this video, we're going to talk about some shortcuts where you can fill in a lot of data really quickly, how you can streamline your functions and your formula even more, and kind of how do we just copy and paste stuff in Excel. It sounds kind of straightforward, but trust me, you're going to be like very frustrated the first couple times you don't do it the best way. So here I have a data set. I came up with random numbers for rainfall. This obviously would not be actually true. You should be using real data. And maybe we had a year and we had rainfall. And while this particular thing may not make sense, it's still going to at least show you what it is. So maybe we're starting with the year 1990. And then I could type 1991, and then 1992, and 1993. Now I'm pretty quick with a keyboard. This isn't like the worst thing in the world. But imagine I had to do this with 1,000 years, or even 100 years, even 50 years. Those would get really, really annoying really quickly. So sure, you can type everything out one by one. But Excel is pretty smart, and Excel notices patterns. So something you can do, I'm going to erase all of this. So I'm just highlighting it and pushing the delete button in my keyboard. I could do 1990 and 1991. So that Excel knows, hey, I'm just going up by one number. So I'm going to highlight these two values. Essentially, I'm highlighting the pattern that I want Excel to copy. And you'll notice when I keep my cursor in the middle of the cell, it's this white cross. That's essentially meaning to select things. But if I move to the corner, you'll notice, it's very small, but you'll notice there's a little square in the bottom right. And if I put my cursor over that little square, my cursor changes to a black cross. So white cross in the middle, this is for selecting and clicking things, clicking and dragging things, but going to the bottom right corner, this black cross is essentially telling it, hey Excel, I'm about to do something. So I'm going to click and I'm holding down on my cursor and I'm clicking and dragging. So I'm still clicking, but I'm dragging, and I'm just gonna pull wherever. And you notice Excel has copied the pattern from year to year. I only entered in 2 years and then just dragged the rest. So let me show you that again. So I'm going to say I'm starting with year 1990. I want Excel to know I'm going 1 year at a time. So I just do 2 years to show it that. I'm going to highlight those 2 years and then drag the bottom right corner. Beautiful. So let me show you something else. This would not make sense in this context, but you might still need it. Maybe it's the year 1990, and I want it to be 1990 for a while. So if I just click the single cell, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to click the bottom right corner. I'm going to click and drag. Excel just copies it. It's like, cool, 1990, we're going to make it 1990 every year. So again, can do this with any kind of data. Now remember, it's recognizing patterns. So for some reason, maybe I want to go by 2s every other year. Highlight both those values. Click on the bottom right corner, click and drag, and Excel copies that pattern. Now, there is some other options. So I had 1990, or let me actually just delete it. I had 1990 and 1992. What if, for some reason, I wanted 1990, 1992, 1990, 1992, 1990, 1992. So I wanted to keep replicating those two numbers, 90 and 92. So I'm going to click them both. I'm going to drag like I did before. Okay, it's not doing what I want in this case, but you'll notice I'm getting this little icon that pops up after I've clicked and dragged. And it says autofill options. Now, by default, Excel does fill series, aka Excel's figured out the pattern and it's just doing the pattern. But if you're like, well, I don't want you to do the pattern, instead I just want you to copy 90 and 92 over and over again, I can select copy cells. Okay, so now it's like, oh, sorry that you didn't want me to fill the series, I'll copy cells instead. Or if you were doing formatting, such as you were coloring the fonts different or the background color different, you could just do formatting. Like, hey, I don't care about the numbers, I just want you to alternate red and orange, red and orange. I can go back, you're like, actually, no, I do want to just go by 2 years. I can click Fill Series again. So that's just some shortcuts, especially when you need to predetermine something. It's kind of nice to use this, especially when you have pretty large data sets. All right, so I'll just keep the current years as they are. Let's say these are precipitations from every other year. And we went on the NOAA website, and that's how we got these rainfall data. So let's do a formula. Let's say we were given it in centimeters, but we wanted to convert it into meters. So you've seen other videos, you kind of know the basics of this, so I'm not going to go too in depth. So we want Excel to do something, so we start with an equal sign. Now I'm going to do something that you have seen before that's called a relative reference. What I mean by that is I'm going to click the cell. So I'm not going to type in 232. I'm going to click the cell that is C3. I could have typed C3, but I find it easier just to click it. To convert between centimeters and meters, I'm going to divide by 100. Bam! It's 2.32. And I can do the same thing down here. Equals, I'm going to click on the cell, and I'm going to divide it by 100. Awesome. Now, the reason I mention this relative referencing, which you have done before, we just might not have named it yet, is you know how I could click and drag and I could copy years or fill series? You can do the same thing with formulas. So I'm going to click where this 1.6 is. Now, we see 1.6, but the reality is what's in that actual cell is equals C4 divided by 100, not 1.6. So I'm just going to highlight where this 1.6 is, where this formula is. I'm going to click in the bottom right corner and drag my entire series. And look, it has already done every formula for me. I didn't have to type it one by one. So I'm going to click on cell D9. And we can see what's inside of the actual cell isn't 2.21. What's actually inside of it is equals C9 divided by 100. If you're wondering how I just got it to show in there, I just pushed the button F2 on my laptop. So Excel copied that formula. Now you might be like, well, the formula was equals C4. Why did it change in all of your other ones? That's because Excel is using this reference relatively. Sure, you put in, was it C4? But what Excel is actually thinking is it's saying, oh, the cell directly to the left. Here's D4, that's where our formula is. You're referencing the cell directly to the left of it. So it's not remembering C4, it's remembering cell to left. So when I copied that formula to the one below it, it's like, oh, here's the cell to the left. Here's the cell to the left. Here's the cell to the left. So that's what I mean by relative referencing. That reference is relative to where your formula box is. With this whole column of data, that is beautiful. So it was really easy. So I'm just going to delete this and go through it quickly. I'm going to do equals. Here's our rainfall. I'm using that relative reference by clicking the cell. We're going to divide it by 100. This is what's going to make it into meters, and press enter. Instead of typing that formula 10 times, I'm just going to take advantage of the formula I have already typed. And I'm going to click and drag it and get the correct formulas. And you should always double check. So I just clicked D11. I'm clicking F2 to more easily see things. Cool, it's doing the cell next to divide by 100. Perfect. And that's going to save you so much time. But I'm going to save you even more time. So up here on in the top, I'm going to write the number 100. And I'm going to just do centimeters to meters. This is just like a mental note, like to know what that 100 means. Something else I could do is, I'm going to delete this. I could do equals, here's that rainfall, C3, divided by, instead of doing divide by 100, I'm just going to click the cell that has the number 100 in it. Enter. Beautiful. Now you might be like, okay, like did that really save me any time? You still typed in the number 100. But what if I look back at my work and I'm like, oh, no, she didn't want it in meters. They wanted it in inches instead. So you could make a new column, you could do the new formula, you could do all of that, or I'm like, oh, well, the conversion factor between centimeters and inches is 2.54, and as soon as I do that, instantly changes. If I had it just typed in equals 100, and then I have to go through and manually do it. So let me kind of show you this again. So rainfall, and we're going to do a comparison. Let's say we're supposed to do it in inches. So originally we did cell divided by 100. Cool. But then we're like, oh, that's wrong. We need to do it by inches. So we have to fix it equals cell divided by 2.54. I don't even need the meters anymore. But had I just referenced this, it would have automatically updated. Okay. So equals this cell divided by this cell. You know, very rarely should you actually be typing numbers into your Excel. Again, you're going to have so many very quick shortcuts if you use references for everything. So now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm not going to type in that formula over and over. I just want to click and drag. So I'm going to click and drag, and uh-oh, something happened. Don't worry, this is scripted. I know there's going to be an error. Something is wrong. And this is where double checking your formulas help. So I'm just going to click one of these random error ones. I'm going to click F2 so it kind of shows me. So it did equals C9, okay, the precipitation directly to the left of it, divided by G8. Well, I don't want it going to G8. Remember, Excel is all relative. It's like, oh, you know, take this number, divide it by this number, which is 1 up and 2 to the right. So that's what it did. This number is 1 up and 2 to the right. Excel's like, I'm just doing what you told me. And we thank Excel. Excel has done a lot of hard work. We recognize that it's just doing what it's told. So in this case, we don't want a relative reference. We always want that number. We always want that reference. It's not relative. I want that one. I want absolutely that one. So what we need to use is an absolute reference. A relative reference is just clicking a cell and just know, hey, it's the one to the left, it's the one above, it's the one below. An absolute reference is very, very, very similar, but very small change. So I'm going to go back to that original formula, which was equals C3 divided by G2. Where the G2 is in this formula, I'm going to click within the formula and put a $sign before G and a $sign before 2. Why it's a $sign, I don't know. If you want to know, I'm sure Google has that. But you use $signs. You do it before the G and before the 2. And you can think of the $signs as like a locking value. It's saying, hey, hold on to G and hold on to 2. Don't change that G or that 2. Those both need to stay the same. So the answer is still the same, 2.32, but I'm going to click and drag. And hey, let's click a random cell. Let's click F2. It did equals C10, the relative reference, and it divided it by that absolute reference. And this is really, really nice, going by that absolute reference. Because again, I did something wrong. Oh, my instructor wanted this in inches. Okay, well, centimeters to inches is 2.54. Instantly changed all of them. Whereas I'd have to do a lot more work, creating a new column, creating a new formula, going through all of that. This, you know, small data set maybe wouldn't have been that much more work, but would have been enough work to be annoying, put it that way. One last thing I want to show you before we end this video is how we copy and paste this. So maybe I'm going to make a graph. I kind of want all my data to be pretty, and I want to copy these inch values. So I'm going to highlight them. I'm doing on my keyboard, I'm doing Control C, but you could right click and click copy as well, but I like using keyboard shortcuts. So I've highlighted them all. I'm pushing Control C, or if you're on a Mac, Command C. Coming over here, again, I could right click and click paste, but I like shortcuts, so I'm using Control V. Gave me zeros. Again, I know it's going to give me zeros. It gave me zeros. What have I done wrong? So whenever something is not working right, always click on an individual cell to see what's happening. So I'm just going to click a random 0. I'm clicking F2 just to kind of see. You'll see it says it in the formula bar too. So F2 is like, hey, I'm taking the cell to the left of me and I'm dividing it by G2, just like my references tell me to. When you copied and pasted the cell contents, which is the formulas. Remember, that cell does not say 91.34. That cell is actually saying, hey, equals C3 divided by the absolute reference of G2. So when I copied and pasted, I just copied and pasted these formulas, but there's no numbers for these formulas to make sense. You don't need to write the formulas again. Let's save some work. So I'm gonna delete this data. I'm gonna go back, I'm gonna copy. I highlighted my cells. I'm doing Control C. I'm gonna come over here, and this time I actually am going to right click. So I'm gonna right click, and you'll notice under paste, I actually have options. You know, usually you don't have options when you paste. You're like, I just paste. But Excel's like, I've got options for you. So the first one is like, just paste. That's what we just did. The Control V, a standard paste, is like, I copy formula, I paste formula. What you want is the values. So I don't actually care about the formula. I want you to copy 91.385827. That's what I want you to copy. And Excel's like, okay, I can do that. I can do that for you. There are other things here. Number formatting, values, pictures, things like that. Honestly, the two pastes you're going to use is just a standard paste. Maybe you did want to copy the formulas, or pasting values. I very rarely use some of the other things. Just know they exist. Feel free to play with them. But again, that pasting values will be crucial. So again, I'm copying, pushing Control C. Actually, you know what? Let me do it this way. I'm copying or highlighting. I'm going to do copy. I want to paste over here. I did right click, and I'm going to choose the values option and paste options. And there you go. Now I've pasted just my numbers. Now keep in mind, if I change anything, for example, oh, I copied rainfall down wrong. It wasn't 227, it was 257. You know, it changes it here because, again, that has the formula in it. It did not change it over here because the only thing in this cell was the number. So just keep that in mind. Copying and pasting to a new area should be the last step you do, because nothing's going to change if you made an error unless you go back and hand change it. So with that, you learned how to fill cells with different patterns, which might help you in getting a lot of data out very quickly. You learned about references, what we mean by a relative and absolute reference. And then you also learned about how we copy formula or copy values that maybe formulas gave us.